Lyra Voss had learned early in life that the best place to stand was at the back of the room, not because she was afraid, but because she had seen what happened to people who stood at the front and got it wrong. She had watched her sister Serafina stand at the front her whole life, and for a long time, it had worked out perfectly for her. Serafina was the kind of woman people noticed before she even opened her mouth. She walked into rooms like she had already been given a standing ovation. She laughed at the right moments, and stayed quiet at all the right others. She knew exactly how to make powerful people feel like she was paying attention only to them. And for years, she had been pointing all of that careful attention in one direction: King Ares Blackthorn. Ares was the Alpha King of Silver Peak, a wolf pack community nestled in the high mountains far from the noise of the outside world. He was not cruel, but he was not warm either. He was the kind of man who made decisions once and never looked back at them. He had been raised to lead, and he led without apology. The people of Silver Peak respected him deeply, and many of them feared him a little, and that combination had kept the pack strong for years. Every 10 years, the Grand Moon Ceremony was held. It was the most important event in Silver Peak. Under the full moon, the Alpha King would name his chosen mate, and the moon goddess herself would confirm it through the sacred vessel of light, a crystal orb that had been passed down for generations. If the goddess approved, the orb glowed. If she did not, it stayed dark. In 40 years of ceremonies, the orb had never once stayed dark. The moon goddess had always confirmed what was placed before her. 3 days before the ceremony, Ares made his announcement. He stood in the center of the gathering circle, with the entire pack watching, and he said Serafina Voss's name. The cheer that went up was immediate. Serafina stepped forward, composed as always, and accepted with a graceful nod. She had waited years for this moment, and she wore her victory lightly, the way she wore everything, as though it had always belonged to her, and she was simply collecting it now. Lyra stood at the edge of the crowd and clapped with everyone else. She was good at that. She had spent a lifetime practicing it, watching Serafina get the things she reached for, and finding a way to be at peace with it. Most of the time, it was not even difficult. Lyra did not want the same things her sister wanted. She did not need a crown or the front of the room. But this was different, and she knew it, even as she smiled and clapped and told herself it was not. She had known Ares since they were children, not closely. He was a king's son, and she was a tracker's daughter, and their worlds did not overlap much. But she had grown up watching him from a distance the way you watch a fire, aware of the warmth without ever believing it belongs to you. She had buried whatever she felt long ago, quietly and without any ceremony of her own, because a girl like her had no business carrying feelings like that about a man like him. She went home that night and did not let herself think about it. 3 mornings later, she woke up to find the front of her house covered in lunar flowers. They were small and silver white, the kind that only bloomed in sacred soil near a true bond. They were not planted. They had simply appeared overnight, curling up through the ground around her doorstep, like they had always meant to be there. Lyra stared at them for a long time, then went inside and made herself tea, and told herself it meant nothing. She did not know that Serafina had seen them too, and had sent someone to pull them up before the sun was fully in the sky. She did not know that Elder Marin, the oldest woman in Silver Peak, and the keeper of the ceremony, had not slept well in 3 days because of a vision she could not shake. A vision of silver light splitting in two, one beam falling on the wrong woman, while the other searched desperately for somewhere to land. Marin said nothing yet. She had been doing this for 4 decades. She knew when to speak, and when to wait for the truth to speak for itself. The night of the ceremony arrived cool and clear. The full moon so bright it turned the grass in the sacred clearing almost white. The entire pack was there. Torches lined the stone circle. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders to see over the crowd. The elders stood near the altar in their ceremonial robes, faces still and serious. Ares arrived last, as tradition required. He walked through the crowd without looking left or right, and took his place at the altar. He was calm. He was always calm. That was what Lyra had noticed about him when they were young, the way nothing seemed to shake him, and she had always wondered privately whether that was strength or just a very well-built wall. Serafina was brought forward in white robes, her dark hair pinned back perfectly. She took her place across from Ares and held his gaze with total confidence. She had rehearsed this moment so many times in her mind that standing inside it felt like coming home. Elder Meren raised the vessel of light in both hands. The crystal caught the moonlight and scattered it across the faces of the watching crowd. Meren spoke the first words of the rite in the old language, low and steady, and placed the orb on the altar stone between Ares and Seraphina. The orb did not glow. A sound moved through the crowd. Not a gasp exactly, something quieter, confusion. Meren waited. She had seen delays before. Sometimes the goddess made the pack be still. She spoke the second round of words and cupped her hands around the orb and asked again. The orb stayed dark. Seraphina's hands, folded in front of her, tightened slightly. Ares did not move at all. His face gave nothing away, but behind his eyes something was shifting, something he had not allowed himself to feel since the flowers started blooming in places they had no business blooming. Meren drew a slow breath and began the third rite. This was the final one. After this, there was no protocol. No one in Silver Peak had ever needed to know what came next. She spoke the old words one last time, and they rang out across the clearing like something being decided. The orb shattered. Not gently, not in slow pieces. It cracked apart with a sound like a stone dropped into still water, sharp and clean, and the shards scattered across the altar and the ground below. And then, in the silence that followed, those shards began to glow. Every single piece of broken crystal lit up silver, and the light did not stay where the orb had broken. It moved. Slowly, impossibly, each glowing shard slid across the ground, the way water finds a drain, quietly following something, following a direction, following a pull that everyone in the clearing could feel, even if they could not name it. The light gathered and rolled, and came to rest at the feet of one person. Lyra Voss. She had been standing at the edge of the circle the way she always stood, to the side, slightly behind the person next to her, not pushing forward. She looked down at the silver light pooling softly around her feet, and her whole body went still. She did not look up right away. For a moment, she just looked at the light on the ground, and something inside her that had been held very tightly for a very long time began, quietly, to let go. The clearing was completely silent. No one moved. No one seemed to breathe. Elder Meren opened her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the circle, over the heads of every watching wolf, up into the cold night air. She said that the moon goddess does not make mistakes. She corrects ours. The entire pack turned to look at Lyra. Ares turned too. And this was the moment. Not the announcement 3 days ago. Not the ceremony. Not even the shattered orb. This was the moment that changed everything. Because when Ares turned and looked at Lyra standing at the edge of the clearing with moonlight at her feet, and something open and terrified and steady on her face all at once, he felt it. The bond. The real one. The kind that did not come from a decision made at a podium, or a name chosen because it seemed right. It came from somewhere much deeper, and it had apparently been there for a long time, waiting for him to stop looking in the wrong direction. He felt it like a door opening in a room he had not known was in the house. Seraphina stood at the altar alone. The silence around her was a specific kind of silence, the kind that comes when everyone in a room knows something, but has decided, out of mercy, not to say it out loud. Her white robes looked very white. Her careful expression was doing its best work, holding together under the weight of something it had not been built for. And then she let go of the mercy everyone was offering her, and she did not take it quietly. She turned to Lyra, and the composure cracked, not all at once. In pieces, the way the orb had cracked. She said things she could not take back. She said Lyra had no right to be here, at the center of this, in this light, in this moment. She said the goddess had made an error, that the elder was too old to read the signs, that this was a trick, that Lyra had done something she could not explain. Her voice echoed off the stone circle and into the mountains beyond. Elder Meren looked at her steadily and said, if she wished to challenge the moon goddess, that was her choice. The goddess had already given her answer. Seraphina stopped speaking. The pack was still watching. That was the thing about these moments, Lyra thought. There was nowhere to go. No one could leave politely. The circle had to hold what was happening inside it until it was finished. Ares walked forward. He walked past the altar and past Seraphina and through the crowd that stepped aside for him without being asked, and he kept walking until he was standing in front of Lyra, close enough that she had to look up at him, close enough that she could see the thing in his face he was not bothering to hide. He was not a man who apologized often. She knew that about him. She had always known it, the way you know things about people you have watched from a distance for a long time, and she could see it was costing him something to say what he said next. He told her he had looked right past her, that he had made a decision based on what was easy to see, instead of what was actually true, that he did not expect her to forgive him that night, but he was asking her for the chance to earn it, if she was willing to give him one. Lyra looked at him for a moment. She was quiet long enough that the people closest to them held their breath. Then she said that she would not be chosen again. She said that clearly. She said if this went forward, it would go forward as something built together, not something decided for her, by someone who had not thought to look at her until a crystal orb shattered at her feet. Ares did not hesitate. He agreed. The light that had been pooling quietly around Lyra's feet began to rise. It was slow at first, moving up like mist from warm ground, and then it surrounded both of them. Not dramatic, not loud, just present, the way the truth is present when it has finally been allowed into the room. The bond settled between them like something that had been waiting a long time to be acknowledged. The pack felt it. There was a sound from the crowd, not cheering exactly, more like exhaling, like everyone had been holding their breath through a long storm and had just felt the air begin to change. Seraphina left Silver Peak that same night. She did not say goodbye. She packed what she needed and walked out of the gate while most of the pack was still in the clearing. Lyra did not know until the next morning, and when she found out, she felt something she had not expected. Not satisfaction. Not relief. Something closer to grief. Quiet and complicated. The way grief usually is when it involves someone who hurt you, but who also used to be someone you loved. She gave herself one morning with that feeling. Then she let it do what feelings do when you stop fighting them. It passed through her and left her lighter. The second ceremony was held 1 month later. No crystal orb, no elaborate rite, just the full moon, the stone circle, the pack gathered, and 2 people standing together in the light they had finally stopped pretending was not theirs. Elder Marin stood at the altar and said only a few words. She said that the moon goddess had been patient. She said that the goddess understood human blindness better than anyone, because she had been watching it from above for a very long time. The pack laughed, softly, and the tension that had lived in Silver Peak for a month left with the sound of it. Lyra Voss became Queen of Silver Peak, not because she had fought for it, or performed for it, or positioned herself carefully for years toward it. She became queen because the truth had a way of surfacing eventually, no matter how deep it was buried, or how many lunar flowers were pulled up to keep it from being seen. And Ares Blackthorn, the Alpha King who had never revisited a decision in his life, had learned the most important lesson of his reign, that the willingness to admit you were wrong, in front of everyone, is not weakness. It is the only kind of strength that actually lasts. They were not a perfect story, they were a true one, and in the mountains of Silver Peak, under the light of a moon that had always known what they were to each other, that was more than enough.